Well, to an earlier and most shameful case of anti-Catholic bigotry, in my opinion, whipped up by the ABC. The ABC, led by ABC reporter Louise Milligan, they pushed this disgusting witch hunt against Cardinal George Pell that had him jailed for more than a year for child sex crimes he could not possibly have committed until the High Court finally acquitted him. Now, that had a huge impact on a spectacular corruption case that will resume in Rome today, well, tonight, our time. Pell, as the Vatican treasurer, a corruption buster, had been investigating very, very dodgy deals involving Cardinal Angelo Becciu, the second most powerful official in the Vatican, in the hierarchy of the Catholic Church. But, of course, Pell getting charged, having to come back to Australia, being in jail, that ended that particular corruption hunt by Pell, derailed it. And there have been persistent rumours that Becciu secretly sent more than $2 million to Australia, rumoured, no evidence, to help get Pell smeared and out of his way. Becciu denies that. But his lawyer last week refused to say what that money was for, said it was official Vatican business and secret. And Pell himself last month said that he only said that he had underestimated the ingenuity and resilience of the opponents of freedom, of reform, people linked to corruption. Well, Becciu and 9 other people are today standing trial at the Vatican. Its biggest ever corruption case, involving its most senior churchman. The most serious charges involve around $500 million that Becciu sank into a failed property investment in London, using people linked to organised crime. But there's also money he gave to a charity associated with his brother, and some $700,000 that he gave to a mysterious woman to be spent on charity, apparently, but was allegedly spent on dossiers of secret intelligence and on luxury goods. Well, Cardinal Becciu's been sacked by the Pope, insists he is innocent, as do the other defendants. I was joined earlier by a man who's covered this scandal from the start, canon lawyer Ed Condon, who now edits The Pillar, a website covering the Catholic Church.
Well, I think this case really can be correctly termed historical. We haven't seen financial crimes on this level tried in the Vatican in any kind of memory. We haven't seen, of course, a cardinal standing trial in the Vatican on financial crimes in several centuries. This is, I think, very much worthy of the term historical. It's, of course, massive in the contemporary sense, because at risk here really is the reputation of the Vatican as a center of finances that people can have trust in, its place at the table in the sort of mature international community. And, of course, probably the reforming legacy of Pope Francis, who has very much from his first days in office staked his papacy on bringing a bit of light and transparency to the Vatican's somewhat labyrinthine way of doing things.
What's the most serious allegation in this case?
Well, it's really hard to pick just one. We're seeing 10 people on trial simultaneously on financial crimes that range from abuse of office to embezzlement to corruption. There have been allegations from some of the defendants against other co-defendants of blackmail, of threats of violence, of all sorts of immoral business practices, which frankly would not be out of place in a Godfather film. It's hard to pick just one, but I think really the one that will catch everyone's attention, of course, is the trial of Cardinal Angelo Becciu, just because he is easily the most senior, most prominent, most public churchman ever to face a trial of this kind. And he's also, from a Vatican perspective, a career insider, the sort of Sir Humphrey Appleby of the Vatican, a career civil servant who occupied the very highest offices. He was the de facto papal chief of staff for a number of years. And to see him on trial, I think, is something that no one in the Vatican orbit ever thought could possibly happen, let alone it would get this far.
Well, there was that investment in the London property, which obviously has the biggest dollar signs attached in Australian terms, well, we're looking at hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. But there's also his connection to a mysterious woman. Have we actually got to the bottom of what his relationship was with her and why he handed her more than some 700,000 Australian dollars?
Well, we know very little about Cecilia Marogna and her relationship to the Vatican Secretariat of State under Cardinal Becciu, except what she's told us herself. And what she's had to say is stranger than fiction in many respects. She alleges that Cardinal Becciu maintained a private intelligence gathering network effectively on the Vatican's dime, that he tasked her with some things which you can perhaps understand, the church having a legitimate clandestine interest in negotiating the release of hostages in trouble spots in the world, charitable workers, nuns, priests, kidnapped, that sort of thing, but also in compiling pretty much what she's called in terms compromising material on other churchmen, on senior Vatican figures. And to have this kind of personal espionage network being alleged by one defendant in a trial against another, let alone one so high profile, it staggers belief, frankly. And, as the trial progresses and hopefully we see some of these defendants making more formal, more developed testimony, we'll get more details about this. But I think really we will see previous Vatican financial scandals and trials like the VatiLeaks affair pale in comparison to what's coming.
But that leads me, obviously, to the question that you've covered in the Pillar a couple of weeks ago. The $2 million, or last week, the $2 million sent by Becciu to Australia. Have you got any idea what that was for?
No, we don't have any idea what it was for. Obviously, at the beginning of this year, we had that very famous story where Austrac mislabeled the amount of money that was sent by Vatican institutions into Australia and mispriced that amount by several billion, turned millions into billions effectively. And since then, we've had public statements saying that they've accounted for $9 million was what actually came into the country, more or less. But we only have, if you like, probative receipts, legitimate causes for about $7.5 million of that. And the remaining $2 million, as you say, came in the form of several payments. I think it was 4 in particular remain unanswered for, that went to I think what you might loosely call a tech security company based in Melbourne in 2016, 2017. And we don't really know what those payments were for. I've asked Cardinal Becciu myself if he can tell us what they were for, and his response was that it's classified information, that this was, if you like, confidential Vatican foreign affairs business. Now, what exactly is going on with a tech firm based in Melbourne that requires the Vatican to be wiring payments of hundreds of thousands, adding up to millions of dollars? I don't know. We can only speculate. Cardinal Becciu was very clear to reiterate that it had absolutely nothing to do with the trial of Cardinal George Pell that was going on in Australia at the time. But again, we don't have any answer, plausible or implausible, even as a theory for what exactly this might have been for in legitimate terms.
Ed Condon, it's a fascinating case, and any viewers that want to keep up to date with the latest that evolves from this amazing trial should look at your publication, The Pillar. Thank you so much indeed for your time.
Thank you for having me.